Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Business Builders Podcast. My name is Tom Borg, and I'm the host of the program. And today we have a very special guest by the name of Dr. Gene Eljay. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Eljay. First, Dr. Gene earned his doctorate in medical genetics with a master's degree in molecular biology from the Johns Hopkins University. He is the founding member of Snooze Easy and Hypnobiosis. Dr. Gene is a long-term educator in many graduate degree programs and in several schools of medicine. Dr. Gene is an international workshop and medical scientific lecturer. Additionally, he is an advanced consulting hypnotist. Dr. Gene is a recognized master certified lecturer and trainer in cognitive behavioral hypnosis. He'll tell us more about that later. And with over 25 years of experience, even complex issues can be resolved easily and naturally. He has published many peer-reviewed articles and is ranked in the top of USA medical scientists. Many of these publications are cited worldwide. Recently, Dr. Gene founded the Transformative Beliefs Healing Institute. Within the institute, his major interest lies in expanding the use of cognitive behavioral hypnosis, CBH, in direct patient-focused management of mental health occurrences and medical-related issues. Welcome to the program, Dr. Gene.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's wonderful being here. Thank you
Well,
again for the invitation.
well, I'm looking forward to our conversation today. There's a lot to be learned, and I know you've got a lot to share with us. So, to begin with, Dr. Gene, just maybe tell us a little bit about what you do in your own words and what you do for your clients.
Yes, so it's pretty straightforward. Um, it's it's the difference between actually making lifestyle changes that you wish and want to have, as opposed to thinking that you want to have lifestyle changes and not being able to make them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm sure everyone has had the experience of, either wanting to lose weight or to work out in the gym. And willpower only gets you so far,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So if you've ever been to a gym on the first week of January, there's no parking spaces left. You can't even get into the parking lot.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
right.
if you come back 3 weeks later, it's empty. There's no one in the gym.
Mm,
And that's the difference between willpower and having an emotional commitment to a lifestyle change.
I see. And you can help people make that emotional commitment to a lifestyle change.
I'm glad you said that. Yes, I serve as a guide, but all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So
Mm-hmm.
they're actually making the change themselves. I'm just helping them. So it's my belief that clearly they know what the problem is.
Uh-huh.
And they also know, and here's the key, they also know what the solution is. But the problem and solution are not getting together.
Mm-hmm.
So using cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy, I can guide them to bring their problem to their solution. So it's very fast. It's like the shortcut of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And the resolution is complete because they're solving their own problem.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions we've prepared today, and we'll divert from them from time to time, but let's start out with the first one, and that is this. What are the two factors that hold your patients back from a positive lifestyle?
Right. So this was very surprising to me um, because those two factors are um, negativity and anxiety and stress.
Hmm.
I say anxiety and stress together because most people don't separate them.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought anxiety and stress would be very hard to change. And I thought negativity was just a matter of shutting off the evening news. but it turns out to be exactly the opposite.
Hmm.
So I can almost guarantee that in the vast majority of patients that I've had, they correct their anxiety to a very low level within 1 week.
Wow.
Yeah, that surprised me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but with these techniques that I teach, you really, if you practice them,
Mm-hmm.
and let me say that that's one difference between medicine and cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy. In medicine, you expect to go into the doctor, he's going to give you pills, and you're going to be cured.
Hmm. Right.
It doesn't work that way, but that's the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
In cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy, the responsibility is yours to do what's necessary to make the lifestyle change that you want.
Mm-hmm. I
So
see.
it takes, a, I'm sorry, so it takes a certain commitment.
Yeah. So it's the onus is on the individual to take responsibility with your guidance to resolve their concerns.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Excellent.
Yeah. So could you give me some examples? You don't have to mention names, obviously, but of the types of people you've worked with or the concerns they had and how you were able to guide them to a solution.
Right. So probably my largest focus is on irritable bowel syndrome and gut disorders
Mm-hmm.
because in the last year or so, there's been a convergence of three independent medical research communities. So hypnotherapy has shown to be 80% productive in over 1,000 hospitalized IBS patients that were resistant to medical management.
Uh-huh.
And the new catchphrase in the literature is the microbiome. And the microbiome has a large impact on gut health as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was shown through animal model testing, where they did fecal transfer from a healthy mouse into a sick mouse
Mm-hmm.
and showed that the gut bacteria, viruses, etc., changed in a positive way and the disease went away.
Hmm.
And finally, there was over 50,000 IBS individuals that were checked for their genetic predisposition, and 6 genes were discovered, four of them in the mental health pathway. Now, the reason I'm saying convergence is because all three of those very diverse techniques show that it's the anxiety stress pathway that is the key to resolving irritable bowel syndrome and other gut disorder.
I see. So if you can help that person resolve it in their own mind first, that's going to lead the way to resolving that physical symptom they're having.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a scientist, I'm very interested to see if there's a synergy between hypnosis and the microbiome
Mm-hmm.
because they're hitting the same pathway,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not related to each other.
Hmm.
So it's not the same mechanism. So hopefully that will help. Now, the interesting part and the thing I'd like to underscore, because this is probably the biggest benefit of cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy, is that while modern medicine is isolated, so for instance, you go to one specialist for this and one specialist for that, they never talk to each other.
Yes.
They, they sometimes know what medications you are, sometimes they don't.
Hmm.
Um, but the nice thing about hypnotherapy, remember that all behaviors are driven by emotions.
Mm-hmm.
if you just look at IBS, of course, you have that physical thing of diarrhea or constipation or a mixture of the two,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have bloating and pain.
Mm-hmm.
You have anxiety and stress. You have muscle pain. You have the uncertainty of anytime you travel that you need to know where all the toilets are located before you even begin.
Right.
And that uncertainty, of course, creates more anxiety and stress. So this is a major difference between hypnotherapy and all other interventions. And that
Mm-hmm.
is that hypnotherapy can actually deal with each element.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're different, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they're all behaviors are based on emotional decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
those emotional decisions are laid down between the ages of 3 and 9.
Hmm.
So when you think about it, what did you know about the world when you were 3 years to 9 years old?
Little or nothing.
And the way the mind works, people don't understand this, but the way the mind works is that the more you repeat something, the more it gets entrenched in your conscious mind that you've been safe, you didn't get hurt, so I'm going to repeat this over and over and over again.
Right.
And when you reach your 50s and 60s, you're still repeating the behavior that's held you back.
Because you in your early part of your life, you found it to work for you. You felt safe doing whatever it
Right.
was you were doing, but you continue to do that over your lifetime, even though it isn't protecting you as you think it once was.
Right. And it's a lifetime commitment to that
Hmm.
error.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of a 3-year-old, someone says, Uncle Tommy is silly.
Mm-hmm.
And the 3-year-old goes running around in the living room and hits one of these little tables and falls down. And what does she say? She says, Uncle Tommy is silly. And by the time that day over is over, she's committed to the concept that Uncle Tommy is committed for the rest of her life.
Huh.
So it's really interesting the way the mind works.
Wow. So you're saying then that 3-year-old believes Uncle Tommy is silly for from that point forward.
Correct.
And that was anchored by that incident where she ran into the table? Or how did
Well, it's just little kids, as you know, don't make logical commitments or analysis of the situation.
uh-huh.
So when she hit the table, she came up with in her mind what was the most clear and most outstanding in her mind, which is what she was just told that Uncle Tommy is silly.
Huh.
So she repeats it, and because she repeated it, it gets repeated over and over and over again. And from that point on, Uncle Tommy is silly, and
Mm-hmm.
that concept won't change.
Hmm. So
Now,
how
if you
much
take that, I'm
go ahead.
sorry, if you take that analogy and look at health,
Mm-hmm.
you can see that if you make poor choices and you repeat them over and over again, your analytical mind, which we call the critical factor, doesn't want it to change because, as far as it's concerned, you didn't die and for it's keeping you safe.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if you partake in junk food and you do it over and over, your mind says, okay, we're going to eat junk food for the rest of our life.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how that is going to affect your lifestyle.
So the mind says, okay, we're gonna eat junk food for the rest of our lives because we've been eating it. And what it tastes good, so it must be good for us. So what is that what happens?
Sure.
Okay.
It's not only that it's, tastes good and it's good for us, it's accepted in the community, which is your immediate family,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore it gets locked in.
Sure. So they see the bags of chips on the shelf or the bowl of chips that are out there, special occasions or just after dinner. So they see this early on in their life. They consume these things. They taste good, nourishes them, they feel, and that's just something that's anchored into their uh, perception of junk
Yeah,
food for the rest of their life. They don't look at it as life threatening. It's something simply that gives them feelings of fullness, of just satiation. They just feel like it services what they want, what provides them with what they need.
absolutely. I use the word distraction. So you can see in this model, if you and I get together and we come up with a plan that gives you hope, which defeats depression, even if we never implement the plan or do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you and I implement the plan, um, that takes away the frustration because now you're actually doing something that may or may not work. We don't know yet.
Uh-huh.
And the third part to that model, of course, is when the fear is lessened or goes away, then you've released that negative emotion and your whole life opens up in front of you.
Uh-huh. Okay. That makes sense. All right, great. All right, let's go to my next question here. And that is this. What does fear of fear mean? What does fear
Right.
of fear mean?
So this came about really interesting from my perspective because I felt that people who were under medical care, uh, possibly the biggest part or a big part of the things that was holding them back was dysfunctional sleep. And those are things that medicine doesn't really deal with very well. As a matter of fact, most physicians never even ask you how you're sleeping.
Hmm.
Dr. Dement from Stanford University came up with this concept of sleep burden, which means your life becomes dysfunctional the greater your sleep burden.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting to intervene. A lot of people believe that they can catch up with their sleep on the weekends, but that's literally not true because if you think about how many hours of sleep you're missing during the week, you can't possibly catch up on the weekend.
That's right.
And the thing about dysfunctional sleep, it's as bad as being inebriated by alcohol consumption.
Hmm.
And you don't know it, which is the key here. So, for instance, everyone has seen someone who shouldn't be driving go up to their car with their keys going, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just going to
Mm.
drive around the block
Mm-hmm.
or whatever."
Right.
Well, that's because their cognitive function has been lowered and they believe they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
And sleep dysfunction does exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
So it lowers your cognitive function. So you think that you're fine. As a matter of fact, some people think they're even better than fine, which I
Mm-hmm.
find interesting. But they have a huge sleep burden and their ability to make choices is very, very poor.
Okay.
So that's kind of how, I got this insight into this cycle of fear of fear. So if you think about it, if you're not sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
sleep becomes a very negative word to you.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I tell my clients not to use that word sleep ever again. They can use rest or slumber or any of the other synonyms, but
Uh-huh.
they already have all these negative connotations stuck onto the word sleep that every time they say it, they're just reinforcing negativity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important for them to reframe their thoughts so that they can look at sleep positively.
Okay.
So,
That makes
so getting
makes
back,
go ahead.
thank you. Yeah, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tom. I'm sorry.
No, so I'm just saying, so by helping them reframe how they view sleep, that helps them correct the problem.
It certainly does, but more importantly, it doesn't allow them, as we said before, to reinforce the negative part of sleep.
Right.
And that's where the cycle of fear comes in. So if you're not sleeping, every time you're going to sleep, you worry that you're not going to sleep,
Yeah, that's right.
creating the fear of sleep.
Hmm.
And then, of course, you don't sleep, which creates the worry that you're not going to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes on in that same cycle we talked about on the hamster on the wheel.
Right.
And eventually, it's just a fear of fear. So you fear going to sleep and you fear when you're approaching that you need to go to sleep.
Hmm.
And that fear doesn't go away all day long. You just either worry about it or you're fearful of it.
Right. So as a hypnotherapist, how do you help a person like that?
So most people don't understand what fear means. They understand what fear's manifestations are.
Mm-hmm.
So they could tell you what happens when someone is fearful, but they don't really understand that fear means you feel unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
So you asked how you would help. So going around that therapeutic model, right? You come up a plan to make that person feel safer. You implement the plan for them to feel safer, and then you release the fear because they're safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Could you give me an example of how that might work with a client or patient or client?
Well, a lot of people, they're it, it's a more complex question than it appears because
Mm-hmm.
sleep dysfunction can be because you're not going to sleep. It can be because you're waking up many times and not being able to go back to sleep. And it can be because you're waking up really early. So the approaches for each of them is different. And that's one of the beauties of cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy is that you pattern the response to exactly what the client patient needs,
Mm-hmm.
which is not common in medical practice today,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay. That's
Most of prescription medicine is based on a population study,
hmm,
not based on what you need.
need individually. Okay.
Yeah,
Very good. All right. Well, let me go with my last question for you. So this is fascinating, and we'll put up on the screen how people can get a hold of you later should they want to get some of your help there and actually get some of their questions answered. So how about this? How does cognitive behavioral hypnosis and emotional intelligence help?
right. So this comes back to the business model.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as you know, that every executive committee is made up of individuals who have their own lifestyle issue, right? They also have their, again, you're an expert on this, but they also have their individual potentials to help and reinforce the group effort
Mm-hmm.
or the effort that's been defined by the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
But just like anyone else, they have anxieties and stress, and they have negativity, and they have roadblocks. Usually, the biggest roadblock is them standing in their own way,
Hmm.
which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're looking at a group effort, you have to have the individuals in that group recognizing the outcome that they want, right? And they all
Mm-hmm.
have to agree to it if they're going to move forward.
Yes.
And you want to make it easy and simple for them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to do that, you need them to have emotional intelligence, which, for lack of a better definition right now, I'm going to say that they recognize where the group is going and their aim is to help the group get there,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to throwing up roadblocks and, trying to stand out or whatever that normally happens in executive committees. You
Right.
you certainly know that better than anyone.
Sure.
And so emotional intelligence, thinking as a community, as opposed to thinking as an individual with your own ego and concerns, is incredibly powerful,
Mm-hmm.
because it not only, the the lack of that not only blocks the ability to produce, but it blocks the ability to produce in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, the future is much more important than the current situation, as we all learned in the pandemic.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Dr. Gina, add to that, I know in the research I was doing that they were finding the leaders during the COVID time, the leaders that had the highest emotional intelligence were had companies that were the most successful. Based on
Yes,
just what you just said. They were helping the whole group get to where they needed to go, as opposed to being so concerned about their own ego or their own way of doing things or getting all the credit or whatever else they were hoping to get as a egocentric leader might.
right. And Tom, as an expert in business, I know that you know that one of the really important cycles that hold the executives and the CEO back is fear of fear,
Mm-hmm.
fear of failure. There are hundreds of different fears
Yeah.
that impact the growth of a company.
Hmm.
So you can see that simple therapeutic model of the cycle of fear on fear, um, can can help a company move forward at a very rapid pace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, this has been a fascinating conversation, and we're just about out of time. But if you could just, for those people that might not be watching this but only hearing it, could you give the listeners a way to get a hold of you? What's the phone number, an email address, a website? What can they do to get a hold of you to find out more how you might be able to help them?
Sure. So I'll start with my phone number.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, it's Jean, Jean,
Mm-hmm.
Eljay.
Mm-hmm.
I have a website, so you can just Google that.
Mm-hmm.
My number is 484-574-1144. And just as a suggestion, since the pandemic, I've been doing my patients and clients virtually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a problem if you live across the world in Australia
Mm-hmm.
or you're my next door neighbor.
Absolutely.
And my
Outstanding.
email,
Mm-hmm. Go
sorry,
ahead.
and my
No, go right ahead.
email is Dr. D, so it's Dr. Jean, Jean, at hypno, hypno, biosis, biosis, and that's one word, hypnobiosis.com.
Okay. Great. I'll have that up on the screen as we're hearing you say that as well. So outstanding. With Dr. Gene, it's been a pleasure having you on our program here today. Fascinating conversation we've had and some great insights to what holds people back and what we can do to move forward. And certainly you're the person we want to reach out to get some additional help. Thank you so much for being on our program today.
Well, no, Tom, I'd like to thank you. It's not often that I get to talk to someone who is a leader in business, who not only helps one business, but helps many businesses move forward into a positive future. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you're welcome, and thank you again.
Goodbye.